Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Zahra, Associate Professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. I welcome everyone to the webinar hosted by the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. And I'm happy to share that we have over 450 participants, over 40 countries registered for this event, including Turkey, Nigeria, Argentina, Iraq, Ghana, United States, India, Thailand, Malaysia, Egypt, Pakistan, Brazil, and more than that. And I'm really very thankful to the Dean of Faculty of Social Sciences and Humanities, Professor Dr. Adam Saud, HOD Department of English, Dr. Irfan Kestani, Cluster Head Ma'am Nadia, and my colleague Dr. Shazia, and our very dear BS scholar Maz, and IT team including Ishtiaq Saab. So we are very thankful to all of them for organizing this webinar. And now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Adam Saud, who is a distinguished scholar as well as Dean Faculty of Social Sciences. His areas of interests are Central Asia, foreign policy, terrorism studies, and CPAC. He has served in different organizations in different capacities for more than 2 decades. He has published in renowned national and international journals, and he has participated in different international conferences worldwide. He is also the founding member of the Ministry of Information Working Group of Countering Violent Extremism. Over to Professor Dr. Adam Saud.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Tessin. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. And I'm really proud to have been provided with this opportunity to interact with one of the renowned international scholars on this particular area. Assalamu alaikum and good day to everybody. I welcome to all of you to inaugural webinar on the corpus linguistics that is hosted by the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at Bahria University, Islamabad. And it is important to inform you that at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, we offer different courses, different programs at undergrad, postgrad, as well as the PhD level. And these programs, they include English, public health, international relations, development studies, anthropology, sociology, and so on, government and public policy. We have media studies, we have psychology, Islamic studies, and so on. We have all these programs at all the levels. So I am also thrilled to announce that recently, with the induction of 2-3 important faculty members, including Dr. Tessin, we have just got permission and approval by the Academic Council to start the master's program in English linguistics. That would definitely be started by fall 2024 semester, inshallah. We are planning to, and we are hopeful that we will be successful to launch that program as well. I also extend a warm invitation to all of you to participate in our upcoming summer school that would be on the corpus linguistics, and that is scheduled probably in August 2024. So again, hats off to Dr. Tessin, who has designed this summer school, and I hope that it would be a great opportunity for all the scholars who would join that summer school in August 2024. So we know that the corpus linguistics is an emerging field of study. Although I'm not a student of corpus linguistics, I'm a student of international politics, but we know that this is a very important field that is being emerged over the period of time. And it serves as a vital empirical foundation for understanding language variation and changes. If you look at its multidisciplinary nature, it gives the evidence that its significant contributions across various disciplines while facilitating data collection and analytics. So from legal to forensic extent, context, public health to international relations, cognitive sciences to language analysis, syllabus design to aiding in the interpretation of laws and determining the authorship. Corpus linguistics, it has made a remarkable contribution to the field of studies. Moreover, we see that it has enhanced our comprehension of language processing and cognitive mechanism. So we are very lucky to have Dr. Benet Vincent from Coventry University, UK today, and he is going to deliver a talk on identifying the useful phrases for novice writers in health sciences particularly. And I extend my congratulations to the English cluster, particularly Dr. Tehseen Zahra, for organizing this insightful event. I'm really grateful, Dr. Bennett, for generously accepting and sharing our invitation and sharing your expertise with us today. And I wish that this event would be a fruitful learning experience for all of us. So thank you very much. And Dr. Tehseen, you can proceed with the proceedings. Thank you very much.
I guess it's me to start then. Thank you very much for that introduction, Professor Saud. And thank you also for inviting me to give this talk. Thanks a lot to Dr. Tehseen for setting this all up. It's a great pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you very much, Bennett, for your time. So,
Yes.
however, everyone know you, but I just want to give you a brief introduction of you.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So, here we have Benet Vincent. Benet Vincent is an assistant professor in applied linguistics at Coventry University in the UK. His research covers applications of corpus linguistics in a range of areas, including English for academic purposes, translation, pragmatics, and more generally, the analysis of discourse. He is currently guest editing of 2 journal issues of peer-reviewed journals, Corpus Linguistics and the Language of COVID-19 in Applied Linguistics and Decision-Making in Selecting, Compiling, Analyzing, and Reporting on the Use of Corpora in Applied Linguistics Research in the journal Research Methods in Applied Linguistics. Thank you very much, Bennett, for your time. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Tehseen. And once again, thank you for inviting me to talk today. Really looking forward to this. So sorry, let's get started. So yeah, great pleasure to be talking to you today. This is a talk I've prepared. It does get a bit technical about corpus linguistics later on, but I've tried to organize it so that it's open to a wider audience as possible. Do feel free to put questions in the chat if anything is unclear. So I'm going to be talking about using corpus to find useful phrases, and it will be based on a case study, like some work that I've been doing with a couple of other scholars, Dr. Lee McCallum and Dr. Aysel Kızıl in Turkey. So let's get started. So here's my overview. I'm going to talk a little bit about phraseology, phrases, and some approaches to it. And then before moving into the specific approach that that I've been using, or we've been using, in fact. And then, like I say, I'll explain it by means of our case study, by explaining the kind of things that we should be thinking about when we're doing corpus linguistics study. So we had a very nice introduction, some very helpful pointers from Professor Saud about what corpus linguistics does and the kind of aims of it. We'll get into some more specifics. So first of all, what is phraseology? What's a phrase? I think everyone is aware of the term phrase, although it can be used in a more technical way, in a less technical way. Phraseology, essentially, like Susan Huntston says, is interested in looking at the way words occur in preferred sequences. And John Sinclair, who's really the kind of the founder of this approach, looked upon phrases as the normal primary carrier of meaning. That is in contrast to words, which we think about as carrying meaning. Sinclair says, look, you look at a word on its own, you can't really necessarily work out its meaning. It's better to look at the phrase as the carrier of meaning. And I think I really like this quotation from the Longman Grammar of Spoken Written English. So it's all about understanding how we produce natural English. It's not just having a grammatical sentences, but it's using these lexical expressions, if you like, phrases, in appropriate ways. And in order to do that, it's helpful to have a corpus. And for those who are not so familiar with what a corpus is, I've got this rather nice quotation from Sinclair, which I think it kind of sums up pretty much what a corpus is. So you're collecting text selected according to external criteria. This means you're not selecting text for their grammatical or lexical properties. You're selecting them because of the way they are used. And the idea is that they then represent a particular language or language variety. So in this case, it could be British English in general, but today I'm talking about the very specific area of research articles in the area of health sciences. But of course, it could be based on geographical, criteria, or as well as like functional criteria. But yes, like I say, I find this quotation quite helpful, this definition of what a corpus is. Okay, so if we're interested in phraseology, in looking at these carriers of meaning, there are various approaches we can take, which you may or may not be familiar with. So collocation, I think, is a fairly well-known term, like the tendency of words to co-occur. Collocation is more about, if you're interested in a particular word, what kind of grammatical features co-occur with it. And semantic preference, I'll come back to later. But that's one approach to looking at phraseology. You start with a word, you build up from that, and you kind of build up to a phrase. And again, I will give you an example of that kind of thing later. Another approach which could be taken is the word sketch. This is taken from Sketch Engine, if you're familiar with it. If you're not familiar with it, Sketch Engine is an online tool for looking at, basically, it was originally designed for lexicography, and so for dictionary making, and part of that is finding out how a word behaves. And word sketch is quite a nice way of looking at that. You could look at Stefan Gries calls collostructions. This is the combination of a particular kind of grammatical pattern and the words that it goes with. So that's another way of looking at phraseology. Common example is like ditransitive. So like words like give me something. What other verbs occur in that kind of construction? So under this dotted line, which I'll explain in a minute, we have n-grams or lexical bundles, clusters. So these are sequences of words. This is another approach one can take to looking at phraseology. And p-frames, which I'm going to be talking about today. So I've divided these two into two because just to show that there are different starting points for this. So if you're doing the top three, normally you start with a particular item. I've used the word item because it could be a word or it could be a construction. So you know what you're looking at to start with. Whereas with these ones at the bottom, it's a slightly problematic term, but we can call it corpus driven. And this is where you don't have a specific idea of what particular phrase you want to look at the beginning. You let the kind of corpus tell you using automatic techniques, which I will talk about more as we go along. So yeah, so these are two different ways of getting into phraseology and approaching it. And to do so, you might use software such as I mentioned Sketch Engine already, or Coca, which is another great one. So I suppose the issue with Sketch Engine is it's a subscription based, it's not free. Coca, however, is free, it's online, you can access it, and it's lots of different corpora there for you to kind of look at words, do some linguistic research. And then we have AntConc, which I used for the talk, for the work I'm describing today. Wordsmith Tools is another very well-known piece of software for corpus research, and Lanxbox, which is a more recent addition to this. Lanx standing for Lancaster, of course. So these are divided into two different groups again, because Sketch Engine and Coca are online, and with the others you can carry out your research offline on your own texts on your own computer. So, like I said, I'm going to talk about P frames, or in full phrase frames today. What are they? So these are technically fixed length strings of word forms, usually with one open slot. And what a corpus tool will do is just find the most frequent ones in your corpus. So in case it wasn't clear what that first bit is, because it's quite technical, we've got here, these are ones which I've retrieved using AntConc. Took me about a minute to do it. And these you can see here they're all 4 words long, and there's a star or asterisk in the middle to show that this could be any word. So that's basically what a P-frame is. And it's an approach, a way into looking at phraseology. So yeah, so once you've got these, you can analyze more closely what sort of words could usually fill the asterisk slot. So if we look at the top one, the of the most common words are effect, aim, purpose, level, effectiveness, results. And then, of course, you can go a bit further and perhaps see which of these words have similar meanings. Like aim and purpose seem to have similar meaning, or effect, effectiveness, results might have similar meanings too. The question, though, that we probably want to ask ourselves is this a phrase? A phrase, technically. Or maybe, is it several phrases? That seems more likely. I think I can answer. Let's not keep things in suspense. These are not phrases, really. This is a way into phraseology, in the way to a kind of starting point from which you jump off and look more closely at phraseology. Okay, so there are a few issues. If you read my abstract, I mentioned this. I think that some of the problems with P-frames include, because they're quite easy to retrieve, I just press a button on the software and I get a list. It seems, maybe sometimes researchers don't go into as much depth as they could, or they just think, well, let's just do some research on this and get a list of those. So yes, like I said, that was very, very easy to retrieve. I seem to have a hand up. I'm not sure why. Perhaps you could put a question in the chat, Mohammed. Okay, so it's very easy to get a list, but there are some things to think about before you even press the button too. So what kind of settings are you going to use? I'll talk about those in a bit. And here's an example, like you'd have to make a decision on size, how many slots, etc. And then once you've got the list, what can you do? How can you extract some really useful data, some useful phrases? And who is it? Who are you making it for? It's a really important question to ask yourself. How will you decide this? Obviously, there'll be previous studies which you can base it on, but sometimes this doesn't work out. So let me just give you an example of published work with P-frames. So this is some work where they've extracted P-frames and then they've tried to put them into a genre. So this is like P-frames which are used in the introductions of research articles, and they look a bit like this. Not wishing to particularly single out these researchers, although I have, I'm afraid, because this is quite a common thing that happens. the issue here being that if you look at this, an important question in that could be a phrase. I'm not sure if it's complete. An important role in there, though, is quite different in terms of its meaning. Same with the others, you know, at the heart of, are these really phrases or not? I'm not sure. So I think that is part of the issue. You need, once you've got some P frames, you need to know where you're going, what it's for. You need some principles to guide you, to help you eliminate some irrelevant material and focus on what you really want to find. So I'm talking about aims. Yeah, I see there's a question in the chat about slides. Yes, I will share slides afterwards, of course. Sorry about that. Okay, so our project, it's important to think about aims. Why are you doing this? So our project was to identify these recurrent P frames in R8 research articles, health sciences, because our collaborator is working at a university where they have a lot of novice writers in this area, and they want to provide them with guidance to help them writing. So we thought P frames would be a good place to start. Once we got them, we would make a useful list of phrases, which we could then share with these novice researchers. Maybe beforehand doing a bit more analysis and in terms of looking at where they occur in introductions and how they are used. And finally, yeah, the final step we'll get to is actually kind of using them to teach and see if they make a difference to their writing. Okay, so like I said, it looks like it's a fairly straightforward process if it's expressed in this way, but there's lots of intermediate steps, lots of things to think through before you get there. By the way, I should also point out that we haven't quite got to the final step yet for various reasons, but we'll be happy to share those results once we've got there. So just a quick overview of our corpus. It's really important to, sorry, I'm just a bit distracted. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's important to have a carefully compiled corpus if you've got an aim of this sort. And this just gives you an idea. So Aysel collected 105 articles in each sub area of health research in order to make sure that we're representing different areas. And in order to choose these areas and choose the journals, she spoke to subject specialists and made sure that they were from the most prestigious journals, so that we can be sure that what we're retrieving from them are phrases that really are used a lot and by, in articles which are appearing in prestigious journals. And yes, just a reminder, I'm talking just about the introductions to these journal articles, not the whole article. Obviously, the corpus would be a lot bigger if we had the whole articles in them. We figured that introductions are quite a difficult thing to write, and it's a very important thing to write because of you have to frame your questions rhetorically very effectively and convince your readers that it's a important topic that you're writing about. So our questions would be, what would a list based on phraseological principles look like? So what are some of the methodological issues that we need to take into account? So in extracting P frames, and then in going from this extraction to an actual list. And can we resolve these in a principled manner? Well, I think you're going to have to be the judges of that, whether we did this. And yeah, like I say, these are the kind of questions that everyone should be asking when they're starting off a project, I think. Unless, of course, well, this is about p-frames, but if you're doing corpus research, you might be looking at words or collocations or whatever, but still you need to ask these sorts of questions, I think. So initial questions, you want to think about the settings. How long is the p-frame? How frequent is it? Is it frequent enough to be worth further analysis? And the range talks about the number of texts. So just to go over these, give you some idea about them. So if you have a shorter frame, then they tend to be, you get a lot more of them. They're a lot more variable, and they'll be structurally and probably functionally less complete. And the opposite is true for longer ones. So just to show you what this means, the of, that could be all kinds of things. It's a very common construction in academic writing, and it's not very specific. So it's very variable. It's not very complete. And as we get longer here, you'll see these are the most frequent ones at each level. That we're getting more towards a specific type of phrase. I think we can all guess what kind of words go in there. Probably aim, possibly results as well. And then at this stage, when we get to 6, it's pretty obvious that it's going to be something like aim. The aim of this study was, or the purpose of this study was. So if you set it at 6, you won't get very many, but they will be quite specific, and they'll be quite, in a way, easy to analyze. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll be useful, but probably, maybe it's more likely they will be. Okay, so with the minimum frequency, we're talking about here about if I just set the corpus software and I retrieve everything that's in there, I'll get a lot of ones which only occur once or twice, but they're not going to be very useful, most likely. And so we want to set a minimum frequency threshold to make sure that we're not spending time analyzing things which are not likely to be useful anyway. And bearing in mind this very interesting study from Bescam, who looked at this kind of phenomenon, and you need to set and basically concluded if you have a smaller corpus, and this corpus is relatively small by corpus standards, you need to have a higher threshold. You need to, make sure that you're not getting too infrequent phrases. And then, of course, range talks about if a frame or a phrase only occurs in one text, it might just be that person's idiosyncratic style. So we need to make sure that anything you're researching occurs in a number of different texts. And it could be a proportion of all the texts you've collected, or just a number, and kind of minimum threshold, like 5 texts or something. But of course, this can't be higher than the minimum threshold. So in our case, we went for 4 words. It's quite a common way of doing it. It's similarity to phenomena that have been looked at before, and it's kind of more manageable. You don't get, if you've got 3 words, you get so many frames. It's almost impossible to look at all of them. So that was really part of our thinking behind looking at 4-word p-frames. The minimum frequency was set quite high for reasons I mentioned already, and also 12 instances. We felt if it's less than that, then they're not really likely to be prevalent, salient enough to be worth looking at. And then they have to occur in a range of different texts, a range of different subdisciplines, so that we're sure that they will be useful for all the different subdisciplines of health research that we were interested in. Okay, so and this is what the software looks like, AntConc. when you use these settings. You'll see the settings are here, 4, 12, and 10, with one open slot. And that's the list you get. So the key number here is 542, and 542 is how many P frames you get if you use these settings on our corpus. So 542 is quite a high number. So the point is, not all of these will be useful. Immediately you can see some of these are clearly not useful. Some of them look more promising, however. So the question is, how do we get this big list down to a manageable and useful list of phrases? And what kind of decisions are made in this process? So here are some of the criteria that we use, and I'll go through them one by one. But essentially, the list is starting with more objective, kind of automatic procedures, and then getting towards the end, much more subjective, involving kind of agreement across different researchers. That's going to be very important to make sure it's fairly reliable. So, excuse me. So if you remember, we started with 542. If we just remove ones which are obviously not relevant because they cross a kind of phrasal, clausal boundary, the punctuation is not included, and you can see that they're not going to be useful. So just removing all those takes already 125 from the total. We're not really that interested in proper names like in the United States. So, I mean, that actually didn't remove very many, but, you know, we can get rid of those to start with. Now, the next criterion is to do with variability and entropy. These are technical terms, so I think I should explain a bit what we mean by this. The variability is related to TTR, that's type token ratio. So if you have high, it's more variable, and if you have low, it's less variable. So in the in, almost any words, like any noun, could go there probably. But if you look at this one, it's not variable at all, because there's perhaps only 1 or 2 words which can go there, probably this. So that will be much less variable. It's more likely to be phraseologically interesting. So less variability means more interest to us, likely. And entropy is more about the regularity of the types. And again, the point, so if you've got a higher one, so it varies between 0 and 1. If it's 1, it means it's very evenly distributed and probably not very interesting, because other factors are coming into into play here. So essentially, if you've got high values in both of these, and these are values which are automatically given by the software, then probably it's not going to be very useful. So like I say, we found if there's one figure is 0.9 and the other is 0.75, it's not really going to be of any interest. It does help save time by automatically removing a load of frames which probably weren't worth looking at. And this is what happens. Yeah, you can see we've removed more than 100 by this way. Another thing that needs to be taken into account is where you have overlap. And a good example of this is on the hand and on other hand. So you can see here that there's only one word really that can go there on the other hand, but there are 2 words that can go here on the one hand and on the other hand. So this one would be retained and this one would be jettisoned. So that's one example of overlap. You don't want to include both because you'll just be doing the same analysis twice. And sometimes you just get the same phrase repeated, and we don't need both of these, so we just retain one of them. But this is all fairly straightforward, but by doing so, we've already reduce greatly the number of frames that we have to look at in depth because they're probably not going to be useful. Now we're getting towards a more subjective end of things, and semantic coherence is quite subjective, as you will see. So semantic coherence, what does this mean? So you look at the frame, like in the of, or whatever it is, and you note the part of speech and coherence of meaning. So is the meaning, does it seem to match other words? So you've got a range of different words. Is there some similarity in their meaning? And if there isn't, if there's more than 50% are not related to each other, then it's probably not worth continuing analysis of it. So like I say, this is similar to Sinclair's concept of semantic preference. And then you might find that in doing so, a frame is the interesting instances of the frame are below 12. So it's below our minimum frequency. Excuse me. And you could remove the frame at that point. So here we are. Here's an example. I'll just give you a moment to look at this and decide, do you think the meanings of these words in the middle, estimated, hypothesized, possible, reported, are coherent? Are they similar or not? Just while I have a glass of water. So feel free to put your comments in the chat. Do you think, is it coherent, incoherent? The thing here is that there isn't really a correct answer, because like you find in any sort of analysis of this sort, different people will have slightly different opinions. And they may have good reason for these opinions too. Well, I think because we started a bit late, I won't go on about this too long. So essentially, I think like I say, there's no correct answer, but it seems to me that these are close enough in meaning, certainly the first three, that we could probably say this is coherent. So if you say something's possible, if you say it's hypothesized, you're saying there is possibility that it is true. Although they give slightly different nuances of this meaning. And then you could look at, I think I've got it here. So the judgment of coherence is not necessarily based on just what you see in the middle here in the node, but you might look beyond it too. You might notice that estimate co-occurs with numbers more often. There we are, they've all got numbers, whereas hypothesized doesn't. But reported does, so at the bottom 85%. So there are more complex decisions to be made, which is what I'll come to next. But at this point, so in our study, we've got, having looked at coherence, we're now down to 73. So really, we've reduced it very much indeed from the original figure of 542. At this point, we think, yes, these are getting much more interesting and most likely useful. But like I say, this isn't quite the finish yet. So we want to look at whether these ones which seem coherent are actually more complete. And this means looking at, well, inspired by this idea of the unit of meaning, we're looking not just at the frame, we're looking beyond it at other words which co-occur. So you're moving from the frame to more to the phrase. And the point here is, if you look at the semantic coherence of the slot word, the filler, why not also look at the patterning surrounding the P frame? And let me give you an example. So if we have the frame impact on, there's 24 instances of this in our corpus. After semantic coherence analysis, you probably might have guessed this, but the word that goes in there is negative or big. And usually, even if it says big, it will be a negative thing. But like significant impact on is not going to be really a good impact, usually. So that's that. If we look at all of the ones which have a word like that, there's 20 instances. But is it complete? And how can we decide whether it's complete or not? So this is the kind of procedure that we went through, and I'll just show you here. So what kind of patterns can you see if you're looking beyond this node onto the left and to the right? And again, I'll give you a moment to look at that before I reveal what we thought about it, what our analysis showed. Well, good, we've got lots of comments in the chat showing how it is not necessarily the case that everyone will agree with other people. So in this case, what do we think? What kind of health science related patterns are there? Well, I'll show you, and you can feed back in the chat if you like, whether you agree with me or not. Oh, sorry, I forgot to show this. So QOL is quality of life. That's a very common acronym that comes up in this particular corpus. CKD is chronic kidney disease, which kind of gives you a clue about the types of words that occur on either side. So if we look to the left, you'll see, well, obviously this is more obvious, isn't it? Has occurs a lot and creates. But also, if we look a bit further for kind of semantic regularity, we will see that things like illnesses, impairment, exposure, and I think we could perhaps formulate this as kind of a condition, have, create. So when we've got this frame or this kind of expression in the middle, we often have this sort of patterning before it, semantic patterning. And how about on the right? Well, you may well have noticed things like this. So it seems to be like quality of life. What else have we got? Health-related quality of life, well-being. So these are things which we want to preserve, that health science is interested in improving. So we've kind of formulated this as some aspect of health, but the point being that health sciences wants to keep this aspect of health, improve it, enhance it, etc. So we're looking now at a more complete phrase. Hopefully you agree with me, which looks a bit like this if you kind of formulate it in a sort of technical way where this kind of square brackets means some sort of semantic category, and have, that's in capital letters because it's the lemma. It could be have, has, had, etc. And then this is the actual frame, which is in italics because those words don't change. And just to show you what an example would look like, so I'm not even sure what that condition is, but it has a big impact on parents' health and well-being. So perhaps we're getting at this stage, we're getting at this stage to something which could be actually useful to people who want to learn how to write in this area. And of course, like I say, there's three of us in this study. We compared our results. We had discussions about where we had disagreements in order to get to this point. And the final number at this point is 34. So we've gone all the way down from 542 to 34 just by following these different procedures. But I think it's, well, yeah, I think it was worth it because what we've got is a list of quite useful phrases. I think they're useful and my colleagues think they're useful, but do practitioners in this area think they're useful? So how could we find this out? Well, we wanted to get stakeholders to have a look at them and see if they agreed with us. And yes, Elena provided some very helpful piloting on this study design. So basically, we've got all our list of phrases, and then we wanted to give them to teachers and researchers in this area and ask them whether they thought they were useful or not. So and asking questions like, do you recognize it? Does it have a clear use? Is it something you yourself would use? Do you think, this is the key thing. So even if it's useful, would new researchers in this area be familiar with it? Might they struggle with using it? And we're trying to get people to, our participants to say whether they were definitely not useful or definitely useful. And this is what a survey item looks like. I apologize that the writing is rather small, but just to fit everything in. So you've got the kind of core phrase, you've got the structure, which I was just talking about, and you've got an example sentence. So hopefully it would give participants a good idea of this. And these are the participants. So like I say, it was in Turkey, in a university in Turkey. Some teachers of English for academic purposes or English specific purposes, and some academics who are actually writing in this area. Here are our results. In a way, I was a little bit disappointed in the sense that they all said, oh yeah, they're great, they're all useful. I wanted a bit more variation in what they said. I thought some of them were going to be less useful, just to help us see what might be useful for research writers in this area. Some of them, the something cause of, I thought was not so useful, but anyway, they thought they were useful. And yeah, it is important to point out at this stage, this is the opinion of researchers and teachers, but not the actual writers. So we actually still need to try this out. So this is where we've got to. Like I said earlier on, it takes a long time just to get to here, but we've still got to try it out with actual writers to see if it makes any difference. But hopefully I've shown you some of the steps that would be involved in making something of this sort. So like the attraction of P-frame research is that you can produce a list easily, and it might even look quite useful. But I think, hopefully you agree with me, actually producing a pedagogically useful list takes many, many steps, and you need to think about a lot of different things. And even at the end, you might not have everything, not every single phrase might be useful. It's important while doing this not to lose sight of this final goal. Who are you making the list for? And also it's important, I think, because this sometimes gets forgotten, P-frames is just a starting point. It's a method. People don't use P-frames, they use phrases. So that's everything that I have to say for today. Hopefully I haven't gone on too long. Thank you very much for your attention. This is just a link to our project, some description of our project. And like I said earlier, I'm very happy to share these slides.